各位朋友你好，我是史东。在今天节目之中，我们跟您探讨的这个题目呢是谁在主宰这个世界。在今天节目中呢，为您访问的是加州Sonoma州立大学的一位政治社会学系的教授，他最近写了一本新书，他的名字叫做 Peter Phillips， 他的这本新书的名字叫做 Giants: The Global Power Elites。在今天节目中呢，我们会和他探讨很多他在这本书里面列出来的一些到底是谁在控制了这个世界的所有的金钱以及权力的运转，这是一个非常有意思的话题。我们现在就把 Peter Phillips 教授请入我们的画面之中。Dr. Phillips, thank you for coming to my show.
Thank you very much for having me.
What an honor. I saw your interview with Abby Martin, which is someone I really respect. But before we get to the subject matter today, could you take some time to introduce to us about Project Censored? I believe you used to be the director of.
Project Censored was founded over 40 years ago at Sonoma State University. And it's an annual review of the most important news stories that the corporate media in the United States did not cover. So we make a list of the 25 stories. I was director for 14 years after Dr. Carl Jensen founded it and ran it for 20 years. There's an annual book called Censored with the year date of its release. And currently it's Censored 2019. And it's all the news stories from 2018 that weren't covered by the corporate media of the United States. There's over 18 different college campuses that are involved in this, and the students and faculty will research news stories and double check to make sure they weren't covered. And there'll be hundreds that are nominated, and we'll pick the top 25 each year to put into a book.
I'm wondering how the mainstream media is reacting or looking at this book.
The corporate media in the United States has essentially ignored us for 40 years. There have been a few reporters and a few coverage of this and that, but the New York Times has never mentioned us. So we just go on, and millions of people see our stories. And independent media, the weeklies and that, cover us quite extensively.
Through your introduction, I think our audience can have a better understanding about where you're coming from on the subject matter that we're going to discuss today. Could you please tell me what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I'm a political sociologist, and my research has focused on elites going all the way back to my graduate school work 25 years ago. And I kind of got intercepted by Project Censored for a few years, but it gave me a really good platform to understand the media and how that's not how elites basically own and control the media, and it's really a propaganda machine, the private corporate media. For elites. So by studying elites, I'm looking at who are the people in power in the world, how do they control resources, and what kinds of decisions do they make? And so the book, Giants, the Global Power Elite, focuses on the core people who control the money, global capital, very concentrated in the world today.
What should be the main message? If you have to give one to our audience about this book, what should they know?
They should, it's a very small number of people. There's about $50 trillion concentrated in 17, 18 investment management companies that they get to decide where to put the money, how it's invested, what kind of policies are implemented. And this is a major core of the free-flowing capital in the world. And there's only 200 people that manage, 199 actually, that manage that amount of money. And so the book, we name who they are, we show their affiliations with policy groups and their intent of what they're doing. And of course, they are trying to grow their capital, so they're investing in places that will give them a return. Sometimes that isn't always beneficial for us and the environment.
You know, as I was reading your book, what you described, I know somewhat, I know something, but I think yours is the only book I know that very detailed, methodically lay out the arrangement of what you describe as the global power elites. Here comes the question: for average reader, what does it has anything to do with our daily life?
80% of the people in the world live on less than $10 a day. So that's not a lot of flexibility, and half the people in the world live on like $3 a day. So for people that are controlling billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, it's a massive amount of concentrated wealth that affects all of our lives. It affects the price of things that we need to buy, food. It affects the price of everything. So and they're taking a return off of all of us in some capacity. And we're being, our labor is being used to enrich them even more. And so their wealth is even more concentrated. So there's 2,400 billionaires in the world and some 36 million millionaires. And they're in the top 1%, which we say the 1%. And they use their surplus capital. They put it in investment management companies to get a return and gain. So included in that, of course, there's 330 Chinese billionaires who are also use their investment capital, but they're not quite as free to go anywhere in the world because they're under the Chinese government. But there's a global capital concentration in the West tries to go everywhere, and the governments in the West will do regime changes, start wars, engage in manipulations through their intelligence agencies to protect this core, this $50 trillion core of centralized capital, and to continue to see it invested. So it's not like these people that run these companies tell the CIA what to do. It's like the government and the intelligence agencies in all the Western capitals know that their responsibility is to allow for the continued growth and expansion of global capital and capitalism.
Let's take one step further. How would things look if we don't do anything, let's say 5, 10, 50 years down the road?
Well, 100 companies, all invested by these giant investment management companies. There's only 17 of them that control 50 trillion. So they are invested in all the oil companies. And so we would see there's only 100 companies that put out 72% of the CO2 in the world. So we'll see continued global warming, continued climate change, the destruction of the environment. Likely we'll see continued war because one of the mechanisms for continued growth is to have wars and military spending. So governments will engage in military growth and expansion in order to ensure profit returns for the global elite. That's very much part of it. So all of us are impacted by that. We're all faced with austerity programs where we're supposed to live on less. There's inadequate money for health and education and for all of us. And they continually are enriching themselves in very specific ways, and wealth will continue to be concentrated even to a greater extent, so that we'll end up with just a few companies that control almost all the wealth in the world. That's the direction we're headed. The real concern, of course, and we're seeing a social resistance right now, is extinction of human beings. And if we continue on the path that we're going, the environmental path and the wealth concentration path, let alone the perspectives of war and continuation of consolidated capital, we could literally see the extinction of human beings on the planet. So I think that's pretty serious in terms of...
You can't get any more serious than that. You were giving speeches and video interviews prior to this book already. So how did people react to your message?
Well, there's a strong environmental movement all over the world now in terms and awareness of the dangers that we're facing. And people can see it in their daily lives and are impacted by it in terms of weather changes and extreme weather. But we don't see as much the concentration of global wealth, which was one of the reasons to write this book. Because there's only 17 investment giant companies. The largest is BlackRock out of New York, and then which is $6 trillion. Vanguard Group, which is 4 trillion, JP Morgan Chase, which is 3 trillion, and then there's Allianz from Germany, UBS from Switzerland. I just found out that UBS is invested in China as well. So they're one of the big giants that is invested there. And, Bank of America, of course, Barclays out of London. There's 17 of these companies that have over $1 trillion. And they're the ones that are managed by only 199 people. So that are on their board of directors. If anything, that's going down. The number of people on these big boards is actually declining. So it's becoming a small number of people. They all know each other or know of each other. They can communicate quite directly. They go to Davos together every year. Several of them attend the Bohemian Grove here in California every year. And they're on various policy councils that set standards for managing this wealth. So what I call the Executive Committee of Global Capitalism is the Council of 30, which is based in Washington, D.C. It's made up of central bankers and top economists. It's privately funded. And when they put out directives or they put out research statements, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and the large transnational money management groups see that as instructions, as what they need to do. So it's a very powerful group with a very small number of people. There's 32 members, and 2 of them are women. And, so it's a very white, male-dominated policy group. Now, the other big policy groups that are non-governmental include the Atlantic Council, which is NATO-affiliated and very much part of protect global security. You look at their executive committee and their top people in the world in terms of security and investment. It's all about investment and protecting global investment. The other big group is the Trilateral Commission, which was originally established by Rockefeller and Brzezinski back in 1973, which was made up of European, American, and Japanese high-level executives. Now has executives from private companies from over 40 countries. They make policy statements that carry a great deal of weight with capitalist governments in the world. So these are how the elite tell government what they need, what needs to happen. And it's not like they have a command structure. They'll put out an advisory report. Government officials will read it, and they're going to just go along with it. They will just make sure it gets implemented. That's the degree of power and concentration of this wealth. Now, they have a problem. Their biggest problem is they have more capital, more wealth than they have good places to put it, to get a good return. So, they're heavily invested in Silicon Valley and Google and Facebook and all of that. But in some ways, they're overinvested there. They need other places. So they're constantly looking around for other possibilities of, investment opportunities. Or they'll take risky investments like the subprime mortgage investments that they did back in 2008. It almost collapsed the entire world system. So, and they know that almost happened. So they're really trying to make sure that doesn't happen again. But the temptation to invest in speculative investment is there. Wars help with investment. So they put a huge amounts of money in Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, the private military companies around the world that are there, like G4S and Blackwater. And so those are present as well. And still, there isn't enough resources. So they want to buy up resources that are controlled by the public, by the people. Water resources and freeways and universities and anything that could give a return on it. They want to privatize the world. So that's a direction that we're headed, is a private world controlled by just a 1,000th of 1%, owned by 1,000th of 1% of the people in the world, and creates a poverty situation for half the world, in which over 30,000 people a day are dying from starvation, let alone the wars and the refugees. 30,000 people a day die from malnutrition, and we have more than enough food in the world to feed them. It's just not profitable for the elites to sell that food, so they'll just throw it away.
You think all the things you just described is by design?
It's a structure of capital growth and expansion that human beings made a decision to do and to expand. They, in turn, could make a decision to partly dismantle it or share the wealth. That's my point of my book, is, okay, you guys, and it's mostly guys, here, we know who you are. You're in charge of the global capital. It needs to be shared. So let's think about sharing it in some capacity. And I promote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a value statement. And so we have a letter in the back of the book to the global elite signed by 90 of my friends and associates who say, hey, you can't continue to concentrate wealth. The environment won't stand it, and global poverty can't stand it. You will create situations of mass unrest and war that could destroy the entire planet. So it's time to think about that and to do something different. We don't have a prescription other than they claim that they can continue to grow, that the trickle down will solve all the problems, and that just isn't happening. The reverse is happening. They're continuing to grow and concentrate wealth, and it doesn't trickle down, and it creates a situation of inevitable collapse.
I think you did a very good job in pointing out the problem. What we're trying to do right now is to figure out a way to change it, not just have them agree to your point and sign some kind of declaration or documents. Do you agree with that?
Well, people criticize me and they say, well, you're appealing to them to fix it. And in part, we are. But we know that there's going to have to be massive civil unrest, protests, actions that engage them and even threaten them in some way. I hope that it remains nonviolent, but riots and hunger riots have happened all over the world, and resistance happens, and it can be repressed. We hope that that will not. We're afraid that it's going to go in a direction like that. So we're saying that the elites need to supersede that. And when they have felt threatened in the past, we know that elites, like in the 1930s here in the United States, elites were very afraid that there would be a revolution like what happened in Russia. They were wanting to, militarize the country. Some were, and others, like Roosevelt and many people of his ilk that were in support, said, no, we have to make some compromises. And in 1934, there was more civil unrest in the country than any other time. The military was called out multiple times, massive general strikes in San Francisco and the West Coast. There were civil general strikes in other states and cities. 1935, during that congressional session, they passed the Social Security Act and the National Labor Relations Act, the two largest compromises in terms of social assistance to people that ever happened in the country. Now, they've been trying to dismantle those for a long time, and the elites in New York that run the investment house will say, we want to privatize Social Security and all of that. But if they go in that direction, it's going to get even worse more quickly.
This might be a good time to bring up this question. What did they have back then that we don't have it right now in terms of forcibility of making the elites to change their mind?
Nothing. They have to be convinced that the direction they're going isn't sustainable for the world or for their grandchildren, so that they're going to have to make a change. And there's many that do understand that. Part of the conversations at Davos is, what are we going to do about the precariat and the downwardly mobile working people in the world who are resisting, and is there too much democracy? Do we have to, close down democratic process? Let alone identifying, human rights and trying to protect human rights. So there are elites that certainly see those as important questions. They may throw their hands up and say, well, we can't do anything. It's all, we have to get a return in order to keep capitalism growing and strong. There are ways of dealing with this in very direct, powerful mechanisms, and they need to share this wealth in some capacity with the entire world. So how that happens, they're going to have to figure that out. We can pressure them. We can refuse to not cooperate. I imagine millions and millions of 14-year-olds who say, I'm not going to go to school anymore until you fix the environment so I can have a life. And we're starting to see that kind of response and consciousness among people worldwide. So those are they will try to repress that as best they can, and use government agencies and the military, and in Sri Lanka, where they just had a terrorist act. Now they've basically shut down civil liberties. They've shut down the internet, and people are under martial law. So they could go there, but then people could just not cooperate, and everything would shut down. Like it did in San Francisco in 1934. I mean, they shut the city down. They shut the West Coast down, and the trolleys didn't run, and the restaurants were closed. And people said, we're not going to cooperate and work to support, this system until you make some changes.
I think fundamentally, we need to make those elites understand it is to their benefit to make the change.
Exactly. It won't take all. It'll only take, just a few of them who start to want to compromise and make adjustments. And it will only take, 1 or 2% of the global population. We don't need a majority. But if we can get, 1 or 2% actively engaged in civil unrest in a variety of ways, non-cooperation, organizing strikes, organizing marches, addressing these people individually, which is why I've named them in the book. We can see this is who you got to talk to. So Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, his home was targeted the last 6 months by protesters who said, we want you to not invest in private prison. And he kind of got tired of that and says, okay, we're not going to invest in private prison. So when I heard that, I go, okay, now let's go for the global military complex. Let's stop you from investing there. I mean, these people can be identified. They can be approached. We know who they are. We know where they live for the most part. They can hire security and create green zones for themselves, so to speak. But that's not going to solve their problem. And it certainly won't solve ours.
You have a chapter in your book talked about media and how it is influenced and how it is operated. It also has something to do with what you just mentioned about the military complex. A lot of people are sitting on the board of the major media companies. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, in the past, 3 decades, we've gone from 50 major media corporations down to 6. And most people, the young people, they don't read newspapers anymore. And so the most part, they're getting their information online and or television in terms of what's going on. All of that is controlled by global money, by global power, concentrated. So the big media companies, if there's a news show on, 2/3, if up to 80% of the content of any news that's coming out, other than local murders, any news globally has already been packaged and spun by a public relations company that works for government or corporation.